It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, yes, we are back with the Real Estate Breakfast, covering the latest Australian housing market, now streaming too on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, from Cairns to Canberra and across all of those regional markets around the country. And we're going to take you to one of those in just a moment. Yes, I guess we are your daily briefing on Australian real estate, including the data, the trends and the insights, just easy to understand information and straight to your preferred listening platform. We always love to hear from you. So if you'd like to let us know how you're travelling, especially if you're looking at buying, if you've just bought, if you have bought into an apartment block, strata, you've hit some problems, let us know all of these things. You can either leave us a voice message, the voice recorder is below in the show notes, or you can send us that email. Our email address is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. Yes, back after the weekend. It is a Monday, August the 24th. I see that it was on this day, back in 1991, Ukraine. They broke free from the collapsing Soviet Empire, hoping for new optimism and the blueprint for a new democracy. Fast forward to today, doesn't exactly look like that, does it? That independence is facing the ultimate trial by fire, defending Putin's savage attack. Yes, it's a brutal war that continues with no end in sight against the Russian invasion. To date, they estimate 650,000 dead on both sides and over 2 million injured. I'm not sure about you. Sometimes we kind of forget about what the Ukraine is going through. Let's not forget they're still fighting hard, and sometimes I have a shower in the morning and I think those boys would love to be in my position, a nice hot shower. They've been in those trenches for weeks, sometimes months on end. Right, let's talk about Brisbane because it's extremely expensive. This morning I'm going to throw up a few options for you. The first option, we have highlighted Russell Island before. Median house price there is around $500,000 with a rental yield of 5.3%. I will throw up a couple of more options that maybe are sort of left of centre, some of these options that you're not necessarily thinking about. But right now, let's go to the far northwest corner of the state of Victoria to Mildura and catch up with Damian Portaro from Ray White. And welcome, Damian, onto the Real Estate Breakfast. Yes, talking of regional areas, you can't get much more regional than you.
Probably not, Craig. So, thanks for having me. We live on the border of New South Wales. We're actually closer to Adelaide than we are to Melbourne.
And what is the drive time to Adelaide then compared to Melbourne?
Yeah, so drive time to Adelaide, which is a very common holiday destination, is probably 4.5 hours, and Melbourne is probably about 7.
Wow, yeah, so it's a big stretch. I did ask you off air where you came from, and you said, funnily enough, a smaller location than Mildura, just down the road.
Yeah, a little town called Robinvale. It's about an hour away. Population, maybe 4,500 people, something like that. So born and bred there, which is up the road. So we're all considered locals here.
Local Mildura. Now, I want to talk to you about tiny homes. This is on your radar well and truly because you're selling them out of Mildura. Not your company, but a company that is importing these from China. They're pretty highly spec'd. I'm not sure whether you can use the word granny flats for these because these are pretty highly spec'd. If you think voice controls, smart curtains, remote air conditioning, and factory-installed electrics, it is a different proposition to the old granny flat that we know.
It is completely different, and half the tech I want in my house that's in these. So they are state-of-the-art. They're manufactured in China, fairly predictable. They come here, they're assembled on site, and then they can be craned and moved later on once they're assembled. And they've got every piece of tech that you can imagine. Sizes, they range from little baby sleep-outs to the bigger model that's got the full kitchen and the bathroom and the whole lot in them. So they are very unique and very affordable, which is important, Craig, in this climate at the moment.
Yeah, and what makes these pods really interesting isn't just the tech, it's the flexibility. Like you say, they can be used for elderly parents, perhaps teenagers, young adults or tenants, creating another living space without necessarily committing to a conventional construction project. In the housing market where we are at, building costs, it's very, very painful. Just talk through this because, as I say, we've talked about tiny spaces, we've talked about container homes with these high conversions. This sort of looks completely different to if you look at a container home.
I think you can go fairly deep into this and the benefits of it, right? So in 2023, the laws changed in Victoria anyway to make it easier to have a second dwelling. It's good from a tenant's perspective because we know that rentals are shortening. Okay, so it can create more supply that way and more affordable living. And, in state of the art, yes, they're small, but at least they're all compliant and they're great quality. If you've got a teenager or mum and dad that need to move back at home, you've got that as well. And even for extra income, if you've got your own home and enough space in the backyard, because again, the cost of living is dear, building costs are horrendous right now. So there's just so many wins to have this there. And again, the benefit is once you don't need it or if you don't need it anymore, you can sell it, you can crane it off and move it on.
You were telling me that you're selling these around the country, which means that there is this catch, planning rules in different states. You've got different restrictions. Property covenants as well can prevent transportable homes being used, especially as a primary residence. Older suburbs, I would imagine, and properties outside major metro areas may offer more possibilities. And I guess Mildura, since we're talking about you, that's a prime candidate.
Yeah, so look, any new subdivision generally has a covenant in place that will say you can't erect something like this as a main dwelling, but older subdivisions, they might not have that. You still need to get a building permit to put one in the rear, but you don't need a planning permit. That was the big change that was put in place. Like these things range from 19 squares to just under 40 square metres, so they sit under the 60 square metre threshold, and it's quick as well. We're talking this can be done in between 9 to 12 weeks. They're up, they're running, ready to move in.
Yeah, I've seen these in China. They've got these videos, and like you say, in terms of the tech, wow, it is very insular. You can see that the construction is pretty high quality from what I can see. So what's the uptake? How many of these inquiries are you getting from around the country?
They're coming in from around the country. I've had from Queensland to WA. Obviously, most of it's coming local at the moment. It's a relatively new thing that's happening, so it's just starting to gain more and more traction, to be honest. And I'd suspect it's going to be very popular, especially in the coming years. Craig, I can't imagine the cost of building coming backwards. I don't think anybody can. And I think the cost of living at the moment we have to get used to, so everyone's trying to find ways to make things easier. And I reckon this is a solution.
And in terms of the pushback on China-made, do you have some people saying, it's China-made, not as good as Aussie? My argument to that is, hey, just have a look at the electric cars, man. They're creaming the market.
Not one question, not one feedback, none of it. And to be honest, I'm actually heading there in October myself, and I intend to have a bit of an inspection there anyway. So not at all. Look, a lot of the products that come into Australia are made there anyway. Let's be honest. This is absolutely no different to that. And look, they have to meet Australian standards. There are other products out there in the marketplace. I think this is unique in comparison.
All right, we're talking to Damian Portaro. He is from Ray White. He's in Mildura. When we come back, what is happening in Mildura property market for first-home buyers? That is next.
From interest rates rising, a shifting landscape, rentals running hot, clearance rates, a tight rental market, we cover it all every morning from 6 a.m. on the Real Estate Breakfast.
Now, I did mention about Brisbane and some of the cheaper options. I mentioned Russell Island. You may also want to consider Mackay Island. That has got a median house price at the moment of $575,000. Rental yield there 4.6%. Annual growth 18.4%. And a little bit further out, you might want to consider Tugulawa. This is a little further. I think this is over an hour's drive from Brisbane. Median house price is around $650,000. And your weekly rental around $475. That's got a gross yield of 4.5%. It is a Real Estate Monday, and we are in Mildura. Mildura. Damian is here. Let's talk about your first home buyers. How's that looking at the moment?
Interesting, right? So probably like the rest of the country, especially regional, we had the investor boom. They did put pressure on first home buyers and made it tough for them to enter the market. So this is where we're at the moment. The investors sort of pushed them out, which as an agent you live locally, we don't like to see that, but that's what happened. And then the building cost obviously went up so high that it also made it more difficult for them to buy, right? Or to build, I should say. So now that those investors have left, we have seen the first home buyers come back into our market. Now, has it been a rush in Mildura? No. Certainly not. I understand other parts of the state and other regional areas had a bit of a rush on. We didn't have that, but it's good to see them come back in and be able to win the deals and get the properties. So not a lot from them on the building space like it used to be in the past. Previous times when there was first homeowners grants and things like that and building costs were affordable and land was more affordable, first home buyers would rush to that space. That's not the case anymore. Now we're finding they are going to good quality, not new, but near new properties is where they tend to land now.
Yeah, you talked about the investors has dried up somewhat around the country for many regional markets. How bad is that right at the moment? Because that's got to hurt, right?
Let me tell you how crazy it was in Mildura. So Mildura peaked for demand in regional Victoria. Now, I was just in Queensland for the last couple of days, actually in Rockhampton. I get to see other regional places and how they are travelling in comparison to what we had. For some context, Craig, in October 2024, I sold my first property, I think in my career, and I sell about 150 homes a year. I sold my first ever home to a buyer's advocate in October 2024. Fast forward 12 months to October 2025, and we had 187 on our books, buyers advocates. So this was an enormous shift. Fast forward to today, we've probably got 5. They came in, they made a kerfuffle. We've never seen such demand like it. It far surpassed COVID. It was only a particular price bracket. And then they started to leave us sort of December, and by about March, February, they were fully gone. And now we've only got a handful that tend to be here. So from 1 to 187 down to 5.
Yeah, it's interesting, the buyers' advocates, the buyers' agencies, they've got all of their investors that are following them. They're sitting there. So, somebody might have 300, 400, 500 investors in their pool, and they just have to nod and wink and say, hey, Mildura is looking pretty good. And that's what happened.
That is exactly what happened, and it's interesting they do that, and then they'll move on to the next area. So Mildura had a great run. What, again, I find very interesting was they were focused between $300,000 and $630,000 was their price range. You've mentioned a couple of median prices around the country. You can still buy property in Mildura for under $500,000 for a 5.5% plus to 6% return, depending on what you're buying. So it was very appealing here from an investment point of view. We suspect now, like much across the country, that rents are about to start climbing again substantially. We've got a bit of excess supply at the moment of rentals on the market, but that's also dropping rapidly, Craig. So this space is going to be extremely interesting over the next, let's say, 4 to 12 months of what happens.
All right, we will wrap it up there in Mildura talking to Damian. Hey, enjoy your Monday, enjoy the upcoming week, and thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning.
Thanks, Craig, for having me, and no doubt we'll do it again in the future.
We are just as addicted to property as you are. The Real Estate Podcast
has been just how much stress is on everyday Australians right across that middle group of what used to be considered middle class, 2 incomes, who usually had a little bit of fat in their budget. They are now really stressed and pushed to the hilt of their capacity with their budget.
It will take something quite big, like a global financial crisis, for it to plunge to that 14-15% decline in prices.
There's only been one period of time where taking a fixed rate was the best way to go, and I think that was just after the GFC, and it was a very small window.
But we've still experienced just over 10% growth in the last 12 months. That's quite different to a lot of other capital cities that have had some negative growth over the last 5 years.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.